Welcome to Off the Court, a show dedicated to making you the best version of yourself as a player and as a person. I'm Coach Jack, CEO and owner of Close the Gate Hoops. If you're trying to take your life and game to the next level, this is the podcast for you. Let's get it. What up, gatekeepers? Back at you with another episode of Off the Court. Today, we have another special guest, Ryan Christie, who actually was with us on a podcast earlier in the year. He's a man very similar to me. He's young and he's in the training business. He works with, in terms of athletic training and basketball training, but he's more towards the athletic training realm. So that's why we're going to talk today about athletic performance and how to gain more athletic ability specific for basketball. And I think it's going to be great catching up with him, hearing about his story and see how he's been doing. But if you don't remember, the previous episode was on February 28th, 2021, and it's titled Faster Ways of Improving in Basketball. And he's a TikTok basketball trainer. That's actually how we connected. We both have a pretty big following on TikTok. You've heard his story. We're going to talk to Ryan again. Let's dive right into it. What up, dog?
Oh, what's good?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can. You can hear me good?
Yes, sir. How we doing?
Good, man. How are you?
Fantastic. You were plowing the snow, you said?
Bro, yeah. All of a sudden, it's like 40 degrees yesterday, and I get out of my workout, and it's like we got 3 inches of snow. I'm like, holy shit.
And where is your hometown again? What's the city?
Toledo, Ohio.
Okay. That's what I thought.
So right off of Lake Erie.
Man, that's awesome. So how you been doing? I just checked. We talked last in February.
Dang. Has it really been that long?
Yeah, it's been that long.
Wow. Bro, I've been really, really busy, man. I've just been grinding, like just kind of put my head down the last like legit probably 4 months since February, really. And just like been focusing on myself and my workouts and my training, trying to build a brand a little bit. Opened up a studio in the summer, which has been awesome. So, I mean, it's just been a lot of time and stuff, and I'm also still in school right now too. So,
Okay, that's what I was going to ask. So you're still in school, and what year are you now?
Senior.
Okay, that's what I thought. Because I should be a junior, but I'm actually a sophomore because I didn't go to school during COVID. Why don't you talk about your studio a little bit? So how has that been, and who have you been training through that?
Yeah, so it's been awesome. It's been a really cool experience for me. Honestly, it's been like one big science experiment. Because everyone I get to work with and I'm doing these programs with, it's like a new person. They have different issues. They're good at, different things, which has been awesome. But I was really fortunate to come across my partner, Nikki, who was opening a yoga studio. And I kind of just randomly reached out to her, and she was like thinking that I wanted to be a yoga instructor, which was not the case. I've never even like done yoga before. So we like sat down and had a little like meeting or whatever. And I told her what I wanted to do. I told her about knees over toes. And she like pretty much just bought in right then and there. So she's been awesome for me just to kind of allow me to do whatever I want and kind of do my thing. I don't have to like go to her with ideas. I can just kind of implement them when I want to. So that's been really cool. But as far as training people, I think my favorite part about the studio is the fact that I'm working with some really, really crazy athletes, and I'm also working with like older adults too, like 60-year-old adults. And it's been really cool for me to see how our habits that we have in society, sitting down all day, wearing shoes, different things like that, how all these bad habits lead to major issues down the line. We're so young that we love to think about like, basically like, oh, I'm indestructible, I'm Superman, right?
Yep.
Like I'm never gonna have a bad back, I'm never gonna have a bad knee. But like the people that I work with, especially the older ones, like those are the people that probably thought the same thing when they were our age, So it's been really cool to see that. And some of those experiences have been like really rewarding for me. But at the same time, my main focus is athletes, and I've been really fortunate to work with a lot of really good athletes in our area as well. I've got some guys that play for the Glass City, I don't even know what they're called, Glass City basketball team, which is semi-pro team here in Toledo.
Okay.
So like half of their team is coming right now multiple times per week, which has been great because those guys are professionals. A lot of them play on that team here in Toledo in their off season and then go overseas and play when that season finishes up in the spring. So seeing how knees over toes has benefited them has been really cool because they're at a different stage in their career. A lot of those guys are like 25, 26 years old. So kind of exiting their prime. But knees over toes has done it's just basically extends your prime. That it basically is what happens. You know, a lot of those guys are telling me that this is the most athletic they've ever been. This is the best they've ever felt. So that's been really rewarding as well. I also work with some youth guys, so some kids that are like before high school. I mean, I wish I would have been doing these types of workouts when I was in 8th grade. You know, I wonder where I would have ended up. So those guys are really fortunate. But and then I've got some high school guys. I'm working with Jerry Easter right now, who's the #1 freshman in the country. And he lives in Toledo, working with another kid named Josh Jacobs, who had 3 major bone breaks and surgeries in his leg before he started with me. And he just texted me a video today of him dunking. So it's been a really cool experience. I'm working with a lot of guys. I mean, it's exactly what I want to be doing. So
that is awesome to hear. And then, so are you just doing the studio now? So are you not doing basketball training anymore? Or how's that working for you?
yeah, so legit, I'm fitting in so much like random stuff. Like I go 3 times a week with a kid named Carter Coaster, who's a freshman, and we do basketball stuff in the mornings at 6 a.m. before school. So and usually with Carter, he plays for me on my AAU team. And he's a really good player. So we usually just work out together, which has been cool because I can get in the gym still. Other than that, I also have been doing stuff on the weekends for basketball. You know, if you don't have a gym, it's just really difficult to find gyms and get gym access. Especially with me doing all the stuff in the studio during the week and the evenings, it's hard for me to get basketball stuff in. So I've just been getting it in when I can, like I said, on the weekends and the mornings. So it's been kind of a grind to like waking up at 5 a.m. is not very enjoyable, but sometimes it's just like the stuff that you got to do.
Yeah, for sure. So how have you been promoting your studio? Did you come up with like a site or something, or how are you doing that?
So we've basically through social media. So like I have my Instagram account where I'm posting a lot of stuff on there. We have our Afterglow Instagram account, which is we post all of our stuff on there as well. And it's called Afterglow Yoga and Fitness is the name of it. And you can look that up on Instagram. But really it's been like almost 100% organic, which I think is why we've started to be like pretty successful with it, you know. Like it's a lot of word of mouth. Like people like, yo, like this is insane, telling their buddies, telling their teammates, and that's how it's really grown. And I think that's how I want it to be. You know, I don't want to be out here like doing all this extra stuff. Like if you want to come work out with me, I want you to be like really committed. I want you to be there. I don't want your parents to like be making you to come, you know. Like I want you to tell me like, yo, when can I work out with you next? Like when can I get in with you next? Can I get in with you before school? Like those are the types of kids that I really enjoy working out with. I'm sure you're probably the same way.
100%. It's very hard to train if you don't have them fully bought in, especially from the enjoyment of training. If a kid's not coachable, it doesn't make our job very fun.
Right. Exactly. That's like been my main thing. And that's why I like my numbers are starting to grow of kids that I'm working with, which I'm really like happy about and excited about. But I really enjoy working with a small group like multiple times per week. You know, like I'd love to work with guys 5 times a week because I think those are the people that really want it. You can really get better if you work out 5 days a week, every week. Like you can see some really crazy improvements, whether that's in your game, in your athleticism, you know, you can just really gain a lot of different stuff from that.
Totally. Consistency is the biggest thing. So in terms of catch up, that was awesome to hear how your studio is doing.
Yeah, tell me about you, bro.
Okay. So I'm playing at Platteville right now.
Oh, are you really playing right now?
Yep. So I went back to
you.
play. I don't remember when we last talked if I said I was going to do that or not, but
yeah, I think you were like on the edge of like deciding if you were going to or not.
Yep. Last minute decision. We're 4th in the nation right now, so that's pretty exciting.
Awesome.
7-0, haven't lost yet, so we'll see how that goes. In terms of CTG, I have 5 employees now, or self-independent contractors. I can't call them employees, but so 2 of them coach in lacrosse. So we have CTG set up in lacrosse right now, and then we still have CTG in Janesville. So I'm basically doing all the business side of stuff since I can't train while I'm in school and play. It's been going pretty good because we've had over 200 kids now. I don't remember where I was at when I was talking to you. If you Google us, if you typed in basketball training, you're from Ohio, but if you did in Wisconsin, we'd be #1 and #2 spot right now. So that's pretty cool.
Dude, that's awesome.
you talking about training, I miss it so much, and it kind of sucks from that perspective. But I know all the stuff we're doing right now is going to make it a lot easier in the future.
Right. Let me ask you this question. How has it been different? Because obviously when you weren't playing, you were able to kind of do your own workouts and work on the things that you thought were beneficial. How has that changed now that you're in season, and what are you doing differently?
So definitely the mental side has been the biggest change from when I wasn't playing to now.
Mm-hmm.
Most of us should know by now that when you stop, it's not that you don't care, but when you have less pressure on yourself and things of that nature, you're going to play much, much better. So my biggest focus basically since I got here is focusing on my mind
Mm-hmm.
and how to maximize my performance in terms of that area, because all the stuff in terms of skill shooting, I work out a crazy amount during the day, so I'm not worried about any of that stuff. It's all about what my brain tells me is what I've been mainly focusing on.
I think that's really smart and pretty very mature thing for you to focus on too, especially when you get into the college basketball season. A lot of people don't realize how much of a grind it is.
Yeah.
It's so long. Your buddies and your friends are going home on fall break, winter break, and you got to stay and play games with no crowd and all that stuff. Like some of that stuff is like really difficult to do, but yeah, the mental part of that's one thing I wish when I was playing at Capital that I would have like really focused on more. I think I was just like, I was 18 years old. I had no idea what I was doing. So it's a little different, but I mean, I completely understand that. That's really cool for you, man.
It's all part of the process, right? Everything happens for a reason.
Yeah. There's some good squads over here in Ohio, like Marietta, I think is ranked pretty high.
Okay. And I'm going to, because I know that school's name.
The Pioneers, I got a few buddies that play for them.
In terms of missing links to athleticism and transitioning that into basketball skills, you put down a lot of stuff that I would cover myself if I was talking about the topic. So did you kind of want to talk about your opinions about it, and then I'll kind of take notes as you talk?
Yeah, that works great. I think that's, like I said, this has kind of been one big science experiment for me. I've been able to see a lot of really good athletes, like crazy athletes actually, and more than basketball. Like I worked with football guys all summer that some of these guys are running like 4.4s out there. So it's been really crazy to see like what are really good athletes. What are they always good at when we start these workouts, right? Or do they always have great hip flexibility? Is like their fascia more stretched out than normal people, right? Like it's the little weird things like that I think really start to add up. And you can probably look and like compare guys that have 40-inch verticals and 4.4 40s, and a lot of them have a lot of very similar traits. So I think that's why like those secret, whatever you want to call them, like I think those are the things that people should be looking at. Something like ankle mobility, for example.
Yep.
And we can just start there if you want.
No, totally. And that's honestly something that I've been working on myself a lot, just because I've had so many ankle sprains in the past.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I believe is honestly a limiting factor to my explosion, because they've just been so beat up. So I literally do tons of ankle mobility stuff right when I wake up in the morning.
Nice.
Because what, obviously you're going to dive into it, but it's basically the base of everything, right? If you have limited ankle mobility, it screws everything else up for your explosion.
Right. 100%. Have you seen yourself improve with your ankle mobility since you've been doing that stuff in the morning?
For sure. And the hard thing about testing explosion when you're in season, it's very hard to have a fully rested and 100% body, right?
Right.
So it's been hard for me to test how it's been working with my explosion, but I know over the long run, just based on science and the logic of it all, that it's definitely going to have an effect on me.
Right. And if anything, maybe not explosion, maybe just a durability thing while you're in season,
Yep.
But yeah, I think like just starting with ankle mobility, like that's one of the biggest things. And I think when you look at a guy like Michael Jordan, probably the greatest athlete ever, like his ankle mobility was off the charts. But I think ankle mobility is really important for a few reasons. Number one, when jumping, for example, if your ankle mobility is limiting, you're not going to be able to load properly to get your knee over your toe and load in a position that's going to allow you to be like your most athletic, right? That's the same thing for me. I did an ankle mobility test like 2 months ago or a month ago, right? And I failed miserably. And I kind of had reached this plateau in my jumping and in my speed, I think, where I'm like, man, I don't know if I can go any higher. Found that and I'm like, wow, this is definitely something that's really important. So yeah, loading I think is like the biggest thing with ankle mobility, where whether you're going to load into a pull up, whether you're going to load in to go block a shot, grab a rebound, you're just able to lower your center of gravity way more than you would have been without that ankle mobility. And then when you can load with your knees over your toes, you're going to actually load properly with your VMO getting involved, with your quad muscles loading properly. And that all goes it back into, your glutes are going to be more explosive then. Your calves and your soleus are going to be more explosive, and it all, like you said, it's the ankle mobility is the base of that. So without that, you're really limiting yourself. Besides the loading though, another important aspect of, especially in basketball, is your ability to play low. And I've been posting a lot of stuff about like playing low lately, like on my Instagram and TikTok or whatever, but like I've noticed a huge difference in my ability to play low since my ankle mobility has improved. Like it feels really comfortable for me to now slide a cone across the floor, when before like it was almost like painful. Like I would feel the pain in my lower back, I would feel it in my hamstrings, because I think that was the main thing being worked. Now that I have better ankle mobility, I'm not really feeling that same type of soreness. I'm feeling the soreness where I should probably feel it, which is like my quads, maybe my calves a little bit, but it just feels way more natural, way easier. And I think those are like some of those secret things when we get into the basketball side of things. Like if you can play lower, you're going to be a way better basketball player, and you're going to be able to play against people that are more athletic than you, more explosive than you, and that's going to be really beneficial.
No, you had a ton of great points, and I think it's safe to say ankle mobility being step one, because a lot of the injuries and mishaps that you talked about aren't possible without the ankle mobility in the first place. And in terms of testing it, a great way to test it for the listeners right now, if you get on one knee and you put a fist and a thumb to the wall and you try to get your knee to touch the wall, right? I'm guessing that's how you tested your ankle mobility.
Yep.
So when I had my ankle sprain and trying to recover from that, it was miserable. I could barely get my knees past my toes in the first place. So I totally agree with you that that's a natural thing that basically all athletic people have without even knowing it.
Right. 100%. Like I guarantee that if I were to look at all my athletes that are like guys that are dunking, guys that are really explosive, and we test their ankle mobility, I guarantee that 90% of them would pass an ankle mobility test.
Yeah.
And I guarantee that if we took guys that were considered to be unathletic and not explosive and we tested their ankle mobility, they would fail the ankle mobility test.
No, I totally agree. So for the listeners right now, I would go check your ankle mobility, see if it's limiting your athleticism.
Right. And I will say this too, like it's not something that like you do for 1 week and your ankle mobility is going to be better. Like I've been doing this for 2 months, I think now, and I'm still getting better at it. And I do it like every single day. So, it's going to be a really long process. But if you really want to be where you want to get to, that's something that you're going to have to sacrifice.
What's your favorite ankle mobility exercise in terms of getting your knees farther?
Literally just like leaning against the wall. Like basically like, when you do the ankle test, like, standing against a wall with your heel on the ground, trying to push your knee over your toe as much as possible. I think that's really beneficial. And then once you start to get more comfortable with that, you can also push against the wall and start to add load with it. And I think that's really good. Another way that I think is really beneficial is by doing some knees over toe stuff, right? So the Patrick step up, for example, is going to be something that you can really use to not only work on that ankle mobility, but start to add load with it. And I think when you add load, that's when you can see a lot of improvements. We do like split squats, the ATG split squat.
Yep.
And there's a variation of the split squat where if you're using a slant board and you flip the slant board around, it literally puts all the force into that ankle, into the Achilles. And that's another really good way. But, something as simple as leaning against the wall, like a calf stretch with your heel down, is going to be something that helps with your ankle mobility.
Then I was going to say my favorite way in terms of loading the ankle mobility is you get into an elevated ATG split squat, and then say you're on a bench and you just press down and you pull the bench upwards, right?
Yeah.
So you're basically putting all your body weight onto the ankle. That's
Yep.
probably my favorite way to work on that.
Sure. That's a good one.
Step 1's ankle mobility. What would you say step 2 is?
I would say step 2 would probably be hip flexibility. I hate being the guy that's like, oh, it's all about flexibility and mobility. Like, that's not really the case.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like, I think, like, I've heard PJF talk about it. Like, everyone says the mobility part is like the most important when that's not true. And I completely agree with him. But the fact of the matter is that when you go and look at the guys that aren't athletic, 90% of them are probably going to have terrible ankle mobility, and 90% of them are probably going to have really bad hip flexibility. So if you can accomplish those two things right off the bat, you know, you can really start to increase your athleticism. And then all the other stuff follows suit. Like you said, the ankle mobility is the base. The hips might as well be a base as well, because when you have tight hips, it's going to put a limiting factor on how your glutes and hamstrings work. It's probably going to tighten up your lower back and your hamstrings. You're not going to be able to load it like you want to. So yeah, I think hip flexibility is second on that list. And I know from a personal experience, again, my hip flexibility was really bad. But with a lot of time and doing a lot of stretches, it got a lot better. And now I'm to the point where like the couch stretches is like my favorite one to work on.
Oh yeah.
Hip flexibility. I think that's the best one. And honestly, that's the only, like pretty much the only one I did for a long time. And it worked really well for me. But when I started the couch stretch, I was legitimately on level 0. And now I don't even necessarily feel that much of a stretch when I do it. So, it feels great.
I was doing that this morning, and I was starting to notice it too, how over time, obviously it gets a lot easier. But it's like a domino effect, right? The like you said, with hips and ankle mobility, when you don't have, you talked about earlier being low, right? Hip mobility, that's exactly what it's about, right? You can't get in those positions if you have limiting hip mobility. So that was really good. I like that point there. Anything else you wanted to add in terms of missing links towards athleticism?
I think muscle balance is one that is really important. And this is something that I've been able to play with, because I think there's a lot of exercises that are floating around the internet, especially with knees over toes, that are like really, really beneficial, especially for like your knees and your quads, specifically the VMO. If you're only going to work on like that, and you're only going to work on your quads, like you're going to create some imbalances in places. So I think it's really important that you continue to work on every part of your body, right? So there's a lot of like little small areas that I think people forget about, and I can just kind of list those off if you want. Like,
oh, totally, go for it.
The glutes, I think, is going to be number one. If you look at any really explosive athlete, their glutes are going to be really strong, and that seems like a kind of a no-brainer. But I don't see very many people doing really good glute exercises. Just to throw two out there: seated good mornings and fire hydrants. Two really good glute exercises that you can do pretty easily that are going to help you improve on that. The lower back, again, that's on the posterior chain, kind of along the lines with the glutes and the hamstrings. The lower back is something that I see a lot of people forget about, and like pretty much like no one does lower back. I watched a video of the Usain Bolt workout, and he did lower back for pretty much an hour straight. That's the fastest man ever, right? And then I see people go in the gym and have never even heard of like a lower back exercise. Just to give two exercises on that one: seated good mornings and Superman's. Two really good lower back exercises. Moving on from there, I think the tibialis is probably another one of those missing links. And that's one of those exercises that kind of has been floating around the internet, which I think is a good thing. I think there's got to be a lot more people doing tibialis raises, strengthening the tibialis, because a lot of things start to change, whether you're on the basketball court or in the weight room, when your tibialis gets stronger. So what I mean by that is, when you have a really strong tibialis, your squat form is going to get much better. And if you have the ankle mobility to go with that, it's going to be really easy for you to squat and allow your knees to go over your toes. And we know that perfect squat form, your knees are actually going over your toes, right? So when you have a stronger tibialis, your squatting is going to get better. When you have a stronger tibialis, your balance on the court is going to get much better, especially 1 foot balance. And I think that muscle is like very correlated with the ankle, that when you are falling off balance, when you're getting bumped, that is the muscle that kind of helps lock you in. In addition to that, as far as handling force, like let's say we're jumping and we're landing, right? If you have a weak tibialis, all of that force is then going to go straight up into your knees, and you're not going to be able to absorb any of that force with the tibialis. And that's kind of one of the main functions of it, right? So if all that force is shooting right up into your knees, that's when you're going to see things like jumper's knee. That's when you're going to see things like patella tendonitis. That's when you're going to see things like torn ACL, torn meniscus, all those things. So that's how important the tibialis is, and why I think it's such a big thing is because when you have a weak tibialis, not only are you going to be way weaker when you get bumped, not only are you going to have less balance, but also your chance and risk of injury goes up a ton. And the last part of that kind of goes with the tibialis is the soleus, which is behind, it's like the lower calf muscle, right? Yep. So in the same way that the tibialis helps handle force, that's another function of the soleus. So strengthening the soleus is definitely going to be beneficial. There's a few different variations of calf raises that you can do that attack the soleus. But not only is the soleus going to be something that helps decrease your chance of risk of injury, the soleus is going to be something that when it gets a lot stronger is going to help you become way more bouncy. And that helps you not only absorb force, but it helps you transfer force into the ground. So those are a few aspects that I think are really important. And if you want to add anything onto that, you can.
No, I thought you had a ton of good points there. And in terms of the tibialis, so that's basically like next to the shin, correct? And then yes. In terms of, those are both paired well with ankle mobility, but that has a direct correlation with your handles, right? The ability to start and stop, absorb force, like you were talking about. If you look 100%. At videos of Kyrie and the positions he can get in, if his tibialis can't absorb force and his ankle mobility isn't good enough in the first place, he can't stop on a dime and move like he does. You know what I mean? Right. Mm-hmm. So that's why I actually do shin raises as a normal daily routine, just because of that reason, right? The ability to protect yourself and be able to move in correct positions.
One more thing I'll throw out about the shin I think is so interesting is that I was actually reading a book, and the artist or the author was a guy from Cal Berkeley. He's like their head track coach there. And he was talking about the tibialis, and he said that the ratio of strength between your calves and your tibialis needs to be 1-to-1 for you to achieve max athletic potential. So what that means is that basically, like, if it's not 1-to-1, you're not going to be as athletic as you want to be. So I would say that from my experiences that most people walking around on a day-to-day basis, that ratio is closer to 5-to-1, maybe even like 8-to-1. And if you think about it, think about if you were to go on like a leg press machine and do like calf raises, you could probably do like 600 pounds, right? Mm-hmm. I guarantee that most people, actually I've seen most people can't even do like a 15-pound tibialis raise. Like, that's really difficult for them. So 600 pounds, 15 pounds, obviously there's a huge issue there. So like, it's just little things like that, like we've been talking about, that make a huge difference.
I think that right there is a really cool stat and to think about, because seriously, like, you could do 600 pounds with your calf raises, and imagine trying to do that with a tibialis raise. It's ridiculous.
Right. And I don't even know if it has to be like, oh, like we got to get our shins to be able to do that much. I think our calves are just like out of balance, right? We talked about muscle balance earlier. Like, our calves are just like out of balance. Our calves are like way too jacked up, where maybe instead of calf raising 600 pounds, like maybe we knock that number down a little bit, but we get the shins closer and a lot higher, right? That could be something where like now you're in a much more better position to be like efficient with that.
And I think it's slowly starting to come around, but the correct knowledge is starting to be spread, right? Because there's a ton of myths and things that just aren't true that people would do, right? In terms of calf raises. Like, I'm sure people like 20 years ago thought calves were the key to jumping, right? So they would just do 1 million calf raises on the stairs or something because they thought they would jump higher because of it. When obviously that isn't the truth. But I think slowly over time, like with knees over toes, I think people are starting to figure it out.
Yeah, definitely.
So why don't we talk about what your favorite exercises would be for a basketball player to improve basketball athleticism?
Yeah. So I think one thing with basketball that I'm like really starting to like focus on and experiment with is like, okay, now we've got all of these traits that great athletes have. How do we use them in the game to be athletic, right? Like,
Yep.
it's one thing to say like, oh, you can jump really high, but like, where are you going to jump high in the game? I think one major thing that a lot of people are lacking, especially when they have a lot of athleticism, is their ability to shoot a jump shot. I think shooting a jump shot, and like obviously the word jump shot is like, oh, it's just like a normal shot. But to me, what a jump shot is your ability to jump as high as possible and still, shoot the shot normally.
Yeah.
That changes your form a little bit. That changes your lift point a little bit, and it's really hard to do from ranges that are further out.
Yep.
But I think if you look at a lot of really good NBA players, for example, Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, like DeMar DeRozan has a great mid-range game. These guys are shooting shots where they're really elevating and they're shooting above the defense. Devin Booker, that's what I would consider a jump shot to be. And it's really demoralizing as a defender when you're playing like amazing defense. You're literally as tight as possible, almost blocking a shot, but that person's able to elevate above you and shoot that shot.
Yep.
I think that's one of the things that I never had when I was playing in college that I definitely have been working on for a long time. And my game and the shots that I shoot has definitely changed. So first and foremost, I think that's one of the ways that you can start to translate that athleticism from not only being in the weight room and whatnot to on the court. How do you get a jump shot? Simply put, a lot of practice with it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like shoot a lot of shots, jumping as high as possible. But there's a lot of drills that you can do that like really support and promote shooting a jump shot. And I think it also depends on the player, right? Like if you're going to be like if you're like a 5'9" point guard and you're not really that athletic, shooting a jump shot, it's probably not going to be the best thing for you.
Yep.
But if you're like, if you're a 6'4" slasher who is really athletic, that's something that would probably be really beneficial to add to your game. And I see that a ton, like no matter if it's like my Ohio Buckets team or if it's at the college level, like a lot of guys don't have that mid-range game in their bag. And it's like, there's so many times that you can shoot that shot throughout a game. And like, if you get good at it, it's super easy. And I just like to think of Chris Paul, like if Chris Paul comes off a ball screen and he sees that he can get a shot at the right elbow, he's going to go to that spot. He's going to jump as high as he can, fade, which is really difficult, and he's going to make it. But he's practiced that shot enough where that fade and jumping high and having it contested doesn't really matter to Chris Paul because he just needs to get to the spot. He's probably shot that shot, 50,000 times. So, that's one of the things. But like, I think doing a bunch of variations where you're shooting different shots at 15 feet and just jumping as high as possible and just experimenting with it. Like, I shot the ball terribly when I first started working on a jump shot for 2 months straight because it was so foreign to me. But over time, it got easier and easier. And then I was able to do it against defense. And then when my ankle mobility got better, I was able to jump higher and shoot it over people, So I think that's one of the things that I think is so lethal that a lot of people don't really know how to work on and don't know why it's important.
I thought you were taking words out of my mouth. So I'm a huge jump shot advocate as well, because obviously I have one and I've had one since my junior year of high school. But I love to teach a lot of my students the jump shot just because of what it can do for you, right?
Mm-hmm.
The ability to make plays and to still make shots even with good defense is so hard to guard, right? And it takes your game to different levels. And CTG actually does. You were talking about exercises for jump shot. We actually have an online program of like specific drills to transform into a jump shot.
Awesome.
My dad made that a couple years ago, so I thought that was really good. So if anyone's listening right now and they want a jumper, go get that program that we have online. But I totally agree with you. If you're someone that's looking to take your game to another level in terms of being able to make plays and score, jump shot is almost a necessity, especially from the mid-range, at least. And from 3, right, and you go farther out, you almost have to have a hybrid shot, meaning it's almost like a jumper and a set shot, which is what I have from 3, because to jump as high as you possibly can and shoot from 3, if you do 5 of those in a row, you're not even going to be able to get the ball next to the rim. So I think you're still shooting on the way up, and like you said, you're elevating as high as you can. But the timing of the release is very, very important, that you don't hold on to the ball too long, which I thought was a great point.
Yeah, and I think you can like there's a lot of things that you can do to like extend your range too. But like I've been able to get to the point now where like one shot that I think is like lethal is that Kyrie sidestep that he hit in game 7,
Yep. So Dame time, kind
right?
of.
Kind of like Dame time, right?
Yep.
So like what I know with that shot is if like let's say I have the ball and I'm a right-handed player and that guy is forcing me to the right. So like
Mm-hmm.
his feet are opened up, forcing me to the right, and I'm on a 3-point line. I know that like I've watched plenty of Kyrie games where like if he sees the defender guarding him like that, he can go to that shot every single time. And it
Yep.
won't matter because he's just going to elevate it above the defense and shoot it, right? So like I think when you can start to extend that to the 3-point line, it is very difficult. And I think
Yep.
it's really important to have a hybrid shot. But when you can start to add some of those little shots, like some of those different moves where you can still like maybe shoot more of a jump shot and like hang in the air a little bit more, like that's a really, really elite type thing. But again, we're working on this stuff with guys that are like probably playing pro, guys that are probably a really high college level. Like to shoot a side step like that from 3 with a jump shot is going to be really, really difficult. But that's like elite advanced stuff that you can start to add if you're ready for it.
100%. And when I changed to a jump shot my junior year, that's actually when I got good, right? So I would probably honestly say that the
Mhm.
jumper was the biggest change in terms of transformation in my basketball game throughout my entire career.
Awesome. That's really cool. It's been
Um,
the same for me too. So
yeah. So when did you start? Like, did you always just have a set shot, and then one day you're like, I want to try a jumper?
yeah, so like obviously my athleticism was just not really where I needed to be to shoot a jump shot. I mean, when I tell you like I was that guy that failed the ankle mobility, failed the hip flexibility, like failed the muscle imbalance, had a jacked up calf to shin strength ratio, right? Like I was that guy. And because of that, I wasn't even able to shoot something like a jump shot. Like I didn't have a choice. Like I had to shoot a set shot because I couldn't jump, right? And I have like my best friend who I worked out with all last year and still work out with to this day. Um, he shoots a jump shot, and we would play one on one every single day. And like, I mean, I can really sit down and play defense, but like, I could not guard this dude. I mean, I could guard him, but like, he would make everything because he was shooting over the top of me. So he's like, bro, like, you should just start shooting a jump shot. And I'm like, all right, let's do it. So kind of just like committed last winter, like, I'm just going to keep practicing it and see what happens. And while I was practicing it, my jumping also improved. So it became a lot easier. I would say now I'm like starting to become like really comfortable with it. And like, so like what that's been 7 months, like it's taken a really long time. But it's definitely been like you said, the most game changing thing for me in my game. But I think shooting a jump shot, like practicing shooting a jump shot is also a great way to like improve your jumping. Like when you're
Yeah.
jumping high often, that's like the name of the game right there.
No, that is awesome. I wrote down the other thing you texted me in terms of transition for basketball, and I talked about a little bit earlier, in terms of movement and footwork and how that translates to dribbling. Do you want to talk
Hmm.
about that a little bit?
Yeah, I think there's like if I were to like I always use Kyrie because I think he's like so technically sound and like a master with his stuff. But like
Mhm.
if I were to look at his footwork, I think there's a backbone of splits and drops that he uses. And obviously he can really like expand his bag outside of that. But when we're looking at like the basic backbone of his game, it's going to be a split and a drop that kind of leads to the rest of his moves, right? So for people that don't know what a split or a drop is, a split is any time that your feet hit at the same time, and a drop would be any time it's staggered, right? So if I have the ball in my right hand, I'm looking to go right. The drop would be my left foot hits and then my right foot hits. And I think that's probably how you teach it as well with splits and drops.
Yep.
Okay, so like I think when you start to get that footwork, especially when handling the ball against pressure, like as a point guard, if you're handling against a press, when you're able to pick your feet up and put them down at the same time with a split, like that's a huge advantage with how you can load, how you can explode, the timing of things, right? I've gotten to the point now where like every single move that I make is a split or a drop because it is so efficient. It's so much more explosive than like, just like trying to go by someone, right? Like that act of like really picking up, putting them down hard is super explosive. And that's why, like, if you were to take Kyrie and we were to like track his footwork, right? I guarantee that we'd see like a lot of those instances where he'd be going from a run his feet would pick up, put down at the same time. He'd change directions, like it'd be really cool to see like a technology like that to look at footwork. I'm Possible and Michael Lancaster does a really good job of like with the skill mat and the footwork stuff. Like it's crazy that that's not being taught everywhere, like all over the country and at every level. But I think that's like it's hard to kind of talk about it too, because we could probably spend an hour specifically talking about footworks, whether it's partial steps, whether it's dig steps, but I think the backbone is like splits and drops. And whether you're in full court, whether you're at the half court looking to get into the mid range and whatnot, I think that's something that is really going to be beneficial.
No, I totally agree. And I actually had, do you know who Mertzi Klein is?
Say that again?
Do you know who Mertzi Klein is?
I don't.
So she works for Micah, and I actually had her on the podcast last week. So it was cool hearing about how he runs his stuff and things like that.
Yeah. Sure. I'm gonna have to go check that one out actually.
But yeah, he's the most detailed trainer there is probably. And he does get a little hate for it in terms of his innovative thinking and thinking outside the box, but it's hard for people to understand the why, right, when they're not that detailed. Right. But I totally agree with you in terms of footwork, those being the base and the backbone. Dang, I looked at the time. We've been going at this for like 50 minutes, which is actually really, really good.
Awesome, dude.
Is there anything else you wanted to add for this podcast?
Yeah, one other thing I would add is just like, as far as playing basketball, like I think there's two things that we'll add and then we can kind of finish up, because I think they're both really important and I don't want to forget about these, right? Like two things. Yeah. So first off, we kind of mentioned this a little bit before, but your ability to play low, I think is going to be like one of those contributing factors that you look at all really good players that they're able to do. Does that mean that you have to play super low every single time you drive to the rim or every single time you have the ball in your hands? No, not necessarily, right? You might be able to get away with it, and it actually might be more efficient to not play low in some certain circumstances. But if there's situations where you go out of a crossover and you're able to drop your center of gravity not only lower but forward in front of your body, the leverage that you can create on a defender is like game changing. And if you want to become a great driver, your ability to drop that center of gravity and move it forward is going to be super beneficial. So, what I mean by that is like, obviously, if I were to just bend down, like my center of gravity is going straight down, right? But that doesn't really help me move forward in an attacking position. But if I can also drop forward, put my shoulders down in front of me, where that center of gravity is now lower and forward, that's where like that leverage and, when you're producing force in a direction behind you is going to be super beneficial. And I started to really get into that stuff when I was doing like all my track stuff this summer. Like I was working with a lot of guys on their 40 times and their speed. And like the main thing is off of a 40, like your first step is actually a negative step, which means it's actually pushing behind you. And that's how you can create the most horizontal force forward. And to do that, you have to be in a really low position. Your center of gravity has to be forward. And it's the same principle, with basketball. So I think that's one of those things that is like one of those contributing factors that all good players have.
No, I when you're talking about the center of gravity, that is Steph Curry written all over it. Have you ever watched him dribble?
Yeah.
He's literally in that position like 24/7. I don't know how it's physically possible to have that much balance of the center of gravity, but he does.
Right. I think he does it so often because Steph is like one of those guys that isn't like, he's not the most like athletic, right? Like he doesn't have the most naturally gifted speed or agility or whatever.
Yep.
Where like he has to get in those positions or he's not going to be able to drive by these guys that are guarding him. I mean, he has the best defenders in the league guarding him every single night, and he's still able to blow by people. So like, I think he's able to do that because he does all the little things right.
No, I totally agree. Was there a second thing you wanted to add? You said two things, or was that both?
Yeah, the last thing I would say is your ability to dribble with a dribble pocket. The very basic instance of a dribble pocket is when you basically put the ball down in front of you and be able to pull it to your side and behind you a little bit, right? And I think that's like really valuable. Like you'll be able to do that. But I think even bigger, like the dribble pocket to me is also like when you're coming off a screen, you're letting the ball float into your hand, right? That's floating into your dribble pocket. And all of those times are going to be times where, you can read the defense, you can pause and slow the game down a little bit, make decisions, make a pass, decide like, oh, I'm open, I need to shoot, right? And that was something like I look back at my high school film, and when I was dribbling, like the ball was out in front of me, right? I was dribbling with my forearm.
Yep.
And I was able to get away with it because I had done enough like ball handling drills that my handle was really good. But when you look at NBA guys, that ball is like legit behind their body. Like they're basically almost carrying it on every dribble, which is like the modern way of basketball, which I think is awesome, right? It should be that way because it takes more skill to be that way. But yeah, your ability to play with the dribble pocket, and I'm sure you have a lot of really good ways to add that into your game, in a lot of drills. And I've like kind of been coming up with some stuff on my own, but I think even just watching good players and watching them hit that dribble pocket is like really beneficial.
Yeah. And in terms of manipulating the ball to that dribble pocket, the main reason it's so effective is because it allows us to move more, right? It gives us more time in between each dribble. When if it's out in front of you, you have a limited time to make even one step, right? So it's going to be a lot harder to manipulate defenders side to side when you don't have that manipulation of the ball. And I think Curry, again, he's a perfect example of that. Like you said, he's not very athletic. So it's not just something he's going to do where he's going to blow by you. He shifts you a little side to side for a little bit, but he'll take like 3, 4, 5 steps in between one dribble, right? Or when he does a hesitation, like he's so effective on his hezzies because he can shoot so well, right? But he'll take 5 steps in one dribble, right? And then hezzy and then crossover. But he does it so effectively that it's not a travel, right?
Right.
So I think that's really good that you added that in terms of manipulating the ball, to have more time, right?
For sure.
Thanks for coming on again. I thought you did a really good job.
Thanks, bro. Yeah, like I said, I've just been like trying to learn as much as possible. I think it's good. Like I definitely want to start listening to like your podcast and stuff because I don't want to seem like I know everything, like I don't think there's people like no one knows everything. Like Michael Lancaster probably doesn't know everything, like, but it's really cool to like share and have conversations and share ideas. It's also cool that we have a lot of the same ideas. So it's always enjoyable to talk with you, man.
No, you remind me of myself in terms of just trying to learn, right? Just trying to learn as much as you can. And from the last time we talked, you seem really knowledgeable about the athletic side of things, which is really, really cool. I talked about it on one of our last podcasts too, but even when you're listening to people and you're learning from other people, it doesn't mean, like you said, that they know everything either, right? We don't have all the answers. The people we listen to don't have all the answers, right? It's all about what we take in and interpret and then innovate, right?
For sure.
So I thought that was an awesome point. Great.
Yeah, I learned a lot of this stuff from other people. Like it's not like I'm coming up with a lot of these ideas like really aren't my own. It's just like, there's a ton of information out there. How can I interpret the good from the bad and like realize that this is really good stuff and like start to implement that? But I think you're right on the nail with that, brother.
Yes, sir. So why don't we stay in touch? I want to keep hearing how you're doing. But thank you for coming on the podcast of Off the Court. You added everything that you wanted to.
Yeah, I'm cool with that.
Awesome.
You'll have to send me like a link to your game or something sometime. I'd love to like watch and support you from afar.
Of course. And for people listening too, that if they want to watch as well, if you Google UW Platteville, it should say live next to any of the games, like for whatever day they're on, right? So if I had a game today, which I don't, it would say live and then you could watch it.
Okay, cool.
Sound good, brother?
Yeah. Awesome, man.
All right. Thanks for coming on, Ryan.
Yeah, for sure. Great chatting with you.
Peace out.
Yep. See you, bro.
Thank you guys so much for listening to this episode of Off the Court. If you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts, please don't forget to leave reviews if you haven't yet. This helps us with engagement and helps us rank higher to make an influence on more basketball lives. I also strongly encourage you guys to check out our free ebook download that's 25 pages long, How to Unlock the Mental Side of the Game. I was a player that was constantly grinding and constantly working, and it was really hard for me not to see results from the amount of work I was putting in. But this ebook that I wrote dives exactly into those types of questions. I was completely ignoring the most important part of basketball, which is the mental side of the game. So the 25-page ebook that I wrote is for you guys to give yourselves a leg up on your competition and almost like a secret weapon. I call it the basketball cheat code. Also check out our website, ctghoops.com. On there, we got tons of programs that you guys can download to make yourselves a better basketball player. We have the CTG Productivity Notebook, helping you guys become addicted to productivity. Of course, in-person training, We are located now in multiple cities. And then we have the CTG blog, free education on becoming your best basketball self. Lastly, follow all our social media pages at CTG Hoops, where we post multiple times a day, trying to make you the best player and person that you can be. All the links for these are down in the description below. Thank you guys so much. Make sure you guys check out all the other episodes of Off the Court, and make sure you're ready for next week's episode. I'm Coach Jack. We out, baby. Peace.